Angry relatives of passengers lost in ferry disaster pelt South Korean Prime Minister with water bottle as desperate parents hire boats to search for their children. Chung Hong-won had a water bottle thrown at him in Jindo, south of Seoul, South Korea. Families of those missing are hiring their own boats to search overnight as criticism of authorities grows. Dozens of boats, helicopters and divers are trying to rescue hundreds of passengers who are unaccounted for. Officials say 164 people have been rescued so far, but the Coast Guard fear the number of casualties could rise. Many of the 470 people on board were high school students who were on a trip at the time. Ferry was sailing to the southern island of Jeju when it sent a distress call around after it began leaning to one side. The government said about 95% of the ship was submerged when the rescue operation began. A 27-year-old woman named Park Ji-young and high school student Jeong Cha-woong are among the dead. Passenger, who was rescued from the ferry, says those who were told to stay were still trapped. This is the moment South Korean Prime Minister Chung Hong-won was shielded by his bodyguards from a bottle of water thrown by an angry relative of passengers on the ferry Seoul, as it emerged that desperate parents of missing school children have been hiring rescue boats to join the hunt for their loved ones. A huge search operation is still underway off the coast of South Korea as rescuers continued looking for 300 passengers missing after a ferry carrying mostly school children sank. Earlier, angry shouts could be heard when the Prime Minister visited a shelter where relatives of the missing passengers waited for news. Some yelled that the government should have sent more divers to search the wreckage. Many of the relatives of the missing have criticized the rescue operation and have gone to look for themselves after divers suspended searches inside the submerged vessel until it once again gets light. The father of one missing child and 10 other parents paid 35 pound each to hire a boat to take them to the scene, along with a local reporter and a diver, reports the International Business Times. There was no rescue operation going on, the man said when he returned to shore. We clearly saw there is none. What they were doing at the time was stopping the oil spill. I'm extremely angry. The media says the rescue operation is still going on. It's all a lie. It makes me so furious. At least 6 people have died, but officials fear the number of casualties could rise drastically with hundreds still trapped inside the submerged vessel. As night fell, emergency services claimed they had saved 164 people from the boat, which had 470 people on board. Dozens of fishing vessels, helicopters and divers desperately scrambled to rescue people on the 6,825-ton ferry in what emergency services are calling the country's biggest peacetime disaster in 20 years. Survivors, who were taken to safety on nearby Jindo Island, described how the emergency services told them to stay on the ship, despite the fact 95% of it had submerged. Cha Eun-ok, who was on deck of the ferry taking photographs when the disaster began, said, "The onboard announcement told people to stay put. People who stayed are trapped." She then described hearing a boom before cargo began to fall into the surrounding water and the ferry started to list dramatically. The boat was sailing to the southern island of Jeju when it sent a distress call Wednesday morning after it began leaning to one side, according to the Ministry of Security and Public Administration. Coast Guard footage showed the vessel submerged with only its bow visible 12 miles from Byeongpung Island off the southwest corner of the Korean peninsula. The government said about 95% of the ship was submerged. The Ministry of Security and Public Administration named 27-year-old woman Park Ji-young, a female employee of the boat operator and high school student Jeong Cha-woong as being among the victims, according to Bloomberg. As well as the passengers, there were 150 vehicles on board the ferry Seoul, officials said. An official from the Danwon High School in Ansan, a Seoul suburb, had earlier said all of its 338 students and teachers had been rescued, but that figure could not be confirmed by the Coast Guard as the search effort continued. The cause of the disaster was not immediately clear, although some survivors reported that the ship appeared to have been involved in some sort of impact. A crew member of a government ship involved in the rescue, who said he had spoken to members of the sunken ferry's crew, said the area was free of reefs or rocks and the cause was likely some sort of malfunction on the vessel. However, marine salvage expert Captain John Noble told Sky News the most likely explanation was the ferry hit an object in the water. He added that passengers would have struggled to get off the vessel soon after it began listing. There were reports of the ferry having veered off its course, but coordinates of the site of the accident provided by port authorities indicated it was not far off the regular shipping lane. Several survivors spoke of hearing a loud impact before the ship started listing and rolling on its side. Within a couple of hours, the swole lying on its port side. Soon after, the ship had completely turned over, with only the forward part of its white and blue hull showing above the water. Coast Guard vessels and fishing boats scrambled to the rescue with television footage showing rescuers pulling passengers in life vests out of the water as their boats bobbed beside the ferry's hull. Other passengers were winched to safety by helicopters. A student, Lim Hyung Min, told broadcaster YTN from a gym on a nearby island that he jumped into the ocean wearing a life jacket with other students and then swam to a nearby rescue boat. As the ferry was shaking and tilting, we all tripped and bumped into each another, Lim said, adding that some people were bleeding. Once he jumped, the ocean was so cold I was hurrying, thinking that I wanted to live. The U.S. Navy has also sent a ship to join the search and rescue operation. They said the amphibious assault ship USS Bonhomme Richard, which has helicopters on board, was on a routine patrol off South Korea's west coast and was diverted to the scene of the accident. President Park Geun-hye ordered all available vessels and special operations divers to assist with the operation, as the rescue continues to help the remaining passengers. The White Car Ferry was 20 years old, having been built in 1994 to hold a capacity of 921 passengers, South Korea's largest news agency Yonhap claims. The high number of people unaccounted for raised fears that the death toll could rise drastically, making it one of South Korea's biggest ferry disasters since 1993, when 292 people died.